So this morning I was talking about the process of healing as integral to human existence. In other words, we can't imagine a human life that is not in need of healing. The World Health Organization some years ago came out with a definition of health as something completely unrealistic. It was a condition of complete freedom from all physical, emotional, social pain or discomfort. So maybe for 5 minutes here or there you might get that. But basically, it was a fantasy about health and happiness that was not related to reality. And now, clearly there are degrees of health, and we've all got something wrong with us, but we can say, I'm okay, I'm in good health. It's probably rare moments in life, probably when you're about, quite young, when you could say you're perfectly healthy. And the same with happiness. Happiness is not in one sense, it's not a continuous state. And as soon as you begin to say, am I happy? You begin to be unhappy because you separate from any happiness that you have. Or if you say, will this happiness last? You immediately introduce a self-conscious element which reflects the ego and the ego's desire to possess or control and so on. So, health and happiness need to be understood at a level deeper than the superficial changes of state, of mood, or climate, or our inner weather. We were reading George Herbert yesterday. So we need to have a sense of a substratum, of a continuity in our life and identity that is where true happiness, true health, true goodness, and so on is found. So when we think of it like that, perhaps it's easier to understand why healing is an integral part of life. And I said that, and healing is part of our growth into health and wholeness and happiness. So healing isn't just repairing the damage when, like when a car stops working or you need to get it fixed, you take it in and then it's fixed and it works. The healing is actually produces the health and happiness. So that's why we need to, first of all, be able to recognize our faults, recognize our limitations, recognize our wounds. And you could imagine, somebody who, for example, was very badly bullied when they were at school and went through a traumatic experience, being bullied and badly treated at school. And then they cope with it, they go on to become a successful and powerful person, but their son comes home one day and eventually they realize that he's being bullied at school. And they try to deal with it, but the father is unable to deal with it, to relate to it at all. He's never acknowledged this memory and how it damaged him and hurt him and wounded him. So he can't relate, or is blocked in the compassion, the care, the empathy that he would like to give to his son. So he ends up becoming quite hard on his son and saying, just get over it, just go in and fight back and be a man, and unable really to give the love that he would like to give to his son. So if we don't acknowledge and know our woundedness and our weaknesses, we'll be unable to make those relationships of caring, of attention, of compassion that actually fulfill our humanity and make us fully human. We're only fully human when we can return the gift to others by our attention, by our compassion. So this is what I was saying, that the healing of our wounds in the eyes of faith begins as soon as the wound is inflicted. Now, the more mechanical model of the human being is that you're wounded, say something happens to you in childhood, or you're not given what you need in childhood, and then, 20, 30, 40 years later, you begin to be aware of it, and then you start therapy, or you start dealing with it in some way. Well, that may be how it works. But in the eyes, with a spiritual sense of the human person, we could say that the healing is able to begin, the healing grace comes in at the same instant that the wound is inflicted. Of course, that healing doesn't work just from the outside, it has to work from within the person. We say in theology, grace works on nature. So grace adapts to us as we are, to our level of maturity, to our capacity. But this healing grace begins and is available to us at an early stage, which is why, of course, for example, if we teach meditation to children at a young age, we're sort of intervening at an appropriate level and in a way that respects them. We're intervening because we're allowing them to open to this grace at a deeper level than themselves, and we know that they feel this, that they can turn towards it much more quickly than we can. Children can receive a gift more easily than we can. We're suspicious of gifts, but children are just grateful for it. So if we introduce meditation to children, that means they have built into them from the very beginning of their life, or early in their life, they have a way of experiencing the healing grace that will be working already, consciously or unconsciously, at the level where they may be wounded. And as we know, children can be deeply wounded very early, without knowing it. A child often, like an abused child, will often interpret what has happened to them as their fault. They can't understand the human person, or the human being who hurt them, and what was going on there. They just don't understand it. It's outside their range of comprehension. But and so very often they know that it's bad, and they know there's something really bad about it, but they blame themselves. So in a subtle but in a real way, meditation, I think, helps us to be open. Oh, sorry, I thought I'd turn that off. Helen, don't call me when I'm giving a talk. So, well, okay, don't tell anyone this, will you, please? No, I know you won't. So anyway, it opens us at the level of consciousness of which we are capable. Healing requires consciousness. That's why Jesus, in many of the miracle stories, the healing stories, seems to almost be a little cruel sometimes with people. Like the woman who had this issue of blood and touched him anonymously in the crowd, and he feels the power going out of him, and then he turns and he says, "Who touched me?" And the woman came to him trembling with fear, because she was unclean. She shouldn't have been in the crowd at all, and anyway she was embarrassed. So it seems a bit cruel to have called her out into the open in this way. But in fact, it was the completion of the healing process, that she should be open and reintegrated into the community. So healing can happen in a moment. Curing may take, a long time. Curing a pain, curing a problem, curing the symptoms of a disease or of a psychological wound may take years or decades and never be complete. But healing happens in a moment. Healing can happen with a gaze or a connection. And this is where our meditating doctor in Ireland has understood something profound about healing, Barry White, and he's working to set up a contemplative healthcare system, which is based not only upon all the technology, which will be there, but also based upon the personal attention between the patient and the caregiver. And we all know that, how different we feel when we have been heard, paid attention to, treated respectfully, not dehumanized, not medicalized, where we are human beings meeting another human being who's not on a pedestal as this kind of medical god. So this healing takes place, in a sense, in an instant, or it takes place certainly as a direct transmission, rather than curing can take a lot of time and visits to the doctor maybe. But until the healing process reaches a certain level of consciousness and we can accept and embrace it and be embraced by it, then our attention is locked. This is the problem. The kind of more interior woundedness I was talking about this morning, which all human beings suffer from to some degree, even if we think we have coped with the problems of our upbringing, our childhood, our attention can be locked. We can't turn all the way around. Because of this woundedness, this trauma, which, against our own will, holds us in a self-attentive state. Or, in other words, we are so hurting so much. Of course, we can cover up that with layers of distraction or layers of pretense. But the pain is still there, and pain always attracts our attention. It's very difficult to meditate when you've got a toothache or even a blocked nose. So, to be able to give attention to others, which is what makes us fully human, we need to be able to turn our attention 180 degrees all the way around. But what happens if, because of a block in our consciousness, our psyche, some trauma that we received, you can only turn your attention 90 degrees, and then it bounces back, or even 100 degrees, or 20 degrees. I mean, there was a famous study some time ago of some street kids who were beyond help. Nobody could do anything with them. They'd been through institutions, they'd been through therapy, they'd gone off into all sorts of camps, and nothing had worked. They were just sociopaths. And so somebody had the bright idea of giving each of them a little puppy dog, which at first they refused. They didn't want a puppy dog. But, so the guy said, well, that's okay, just leave it. We'll have this, it will be put down, it will be put to sleep, because they've got too many in the dog home. So he said, I'm just going to leave it. If you don't like it, it doesn't matter. Just leave it, forget it. And in most cases, just sitting there with this little puppy dog, knowing that they had to feed it, and that they realized that when it was hungry, it began to look hungry, and all they had to do was put some food into a plate, and it would eat it, and then it would be very happy, and then it would come. So this was the first time in their life that they had paid attention to the feelings of another sentient being. And of course, they also found the joy that came with that. The joy of even the puppy being grateful. So, but we can easily be blocked, and our attention locked in at a certain degree on ourselves. Maybe mentally we can turn the attention to others, intellectually, or we can pretend that we're paying attention to other people. We're doing it if our professional life demands it, or other people expect it. We can pretend that we're giving this attention, but it doesn't come from the heart. It's not genuine, it's not the whole person attention. And if it's only coming from the head, then we become not fellow human beings walking with others in their need. We become exploiters, for we become sort of professional carers and lacking in compassion. There was a famous health trust, National Health Trust in England some years ago, the North Mid Staffordshire Health Trust, I think. And it was meeting all the targets from the Department of Health. It was hitting the financial targets perfectly. And then somebody noticed that more people were dying in this health trust than anywhere else. So it was very well run and efficient. The only thing was that there were an unusual number of people who were dying unnecessarily. So this became a scandal. They sent in investigators. I think they sent in the Obama head of Obamacare. And then he reported back to the British government, and he had something like 560 recommendations. And then the Prime Minister at the time asked to see him, and as he probably didn't have time to read the whole report, he said, if you could sum this up in one word, what would it be? And the guy said, a lack of love. A lack of love. That quality of attention. Yeah. So, so if our attention is to others is really just from the head and at the level of the heart, it's blocked or locked, then we become exploiters, we become judgmental. We see the other as a source of benefits or dangers to ourselves rather than as a human being with whom we commune. And this self-centered lock mechanism, which you could almost call sin, this is a false protection. And it's the source of many more wounds and tortures to the vulnerability of ourself and others. So this state of apparent self-protection, where we're locked in on ourselves, self-centered, causes more suffering than the healing process would. So this is where I think, what I was reading this morning from St. John, this is why this new commandment to love one another, which he says is not such a new commandment, is the simple heart of the gospel. If we were to sum up the whole gospel, like the Obamacare person summed up the causes of the health crisis, it would be in this one word: love one another. If we can give our attention, intense attention, single-minded, open-hearted attention to others, it turns us around. And as it turns us around, it also heals the wounds that we are carrying. So the attention we give to others is an integral part of our own healing and of our own past. I was saying we carry the past in us in one form or another, but the past has to be mastered, it has to be integrated. We have to overcome our conditioning. Otherwise, we simply stay in the rut and keep repeating the patterns of our lives. And it is redemption to be pushed out of this self-repeating pattern. That's why salvation is really the same word as healing. We think of salvation as some kind of legal exoneration. You know, we're allowed into heaven because we obeyed the rules, or we did lots of good things. But the meaning of it is exactly as Jesus described it. I have not come to judge the world, but to heal the world, to save the world. That's the heart of Christianity. Somehow or other, we ended up going back to a pre-Jesus teaching on sin and law and punishment and all this, and forgotten the outpouring of the Holy Spirit that brings grace to the wounded human being.